My name is Nana May, and this happened to me. The morning my husband died, no one called me. Not my son, not my daughter, not even his brother. I found out from his boss. Mrs. May, you need to come to the hospital. That was all he said. No, I'm sorry. No explanation. Just urgency. Why was I the last to know? I stood in the kitchen holding the phone long after the line went dead. The kettle was screaming on the stove. I didn't move. Silence. Replaced. When I reached the hospital, his boss was already there. Thomas Green. Perfect suit. Perfect posture. Perfect timing. He walked toward me like a man who had rehearsed this moment. I didn't think you'd want to hear it from anyone else, he said carefully. I didn't understand that sentence then. I do now. My husband, Harold, was gone. Massive heart attack in his office. Instant, they said. Instant. As if 38 years of marriage could disappear instantly. They took me into a room that smelled like disinfectant and something colder. Something final. I held his hand. It was still warm. Why didn't you call me? I whispered. His phone wasn't in his pocket. That bothered me. I didn't know why yet. The funeral was 3 days later. 3 days. 38 years reduced to 72 hours of preparation. My daughter-in-law, Elise, handled most of it. She said she was just trying to help. I watched her move around my house like she belonged there, answering calls, speaking to the pastor, making decisions, without asking me. It's too much for you right now, she told me softly. Too much. I nodded. I stayed quiet to keep the peace. At the funeral, I noticed something strange. Thomas Green stood beside my son like family, not behind him, beside him. They whispered twice during the service. When I approached, they stopped. You okay, Mom? My son asked. Mom, not are you holding up? Not do you need anything? Just a quick check-in. Like I was fragile glass. I'm fine, I said. I wasn't. After the burial, everyone came back to my house. My house. But it didn't feel like mine anymore. I went upstairs for a moment of quiet. When I came back down, they were sitting at my dining table. Thomas, my son, Elise, and a folder. When they saw me, the conversation stopped. That silence again. I hate silence now. Is something wrong? I asked. My son hesitated. It's just paperwork, Mom. Paperwork. That word would change everything. Later that night, after everyone left, I opened Harold's office drawer. He had always kept important documents there. Insurance, property deeds, bank statements. The drawer was empty. Empty. I checked the filing cabinet. Empty. Even his laptop was gone. I stood in that room and felt something shift inside me. Harold was organized, careful, predictable. He wouldn't remove everything without telling me. Unless, no, I pushed the thought away. The next morning, I received a bank alert. Joint account access updated. Updated. I hadn't changed anything. My hands trembled as I logged in. My son's name had been added. 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. Before Harold died. Why was I the last to know? I called my son immediately. Mom, calm down, he said. Dad wanted to make things easier. Easier for who? For everyone. Everyone. That word felt like an eviction notice. I've always handled the accounts with your father. I know, but things are different now. Different? I didn't recognize his voice. It was rehearsed. That afternoon, Thomas Green called again. I think we should meet, he said. Why? There are some matters your husband didn't fully explain. Explain to who? To you. The words landed like stones. We met at a quiet cafe near Harold's office. Thomas slid a folder across the table. I debated whether to show you this. My chest tightened. Inside were documents, company restructuring papers, board votes, and one signature. Harold's, transferring a significant portion of his company shares. To my son. Effective immediately. Dated 1 month ago. I stared at the paper. That doesn't make sense, I whispered. He would have told me. Thomas studied me carefully. He said he didn't want to worry you. There it was again. Protected. Handled. Excluded. When I got home, Elise was in my kitchen, using my mixing bowl. I thought I'd make dinner, she smiled. I looked at her hands. Wearing Harold's watch. My husband's watch, I said quietly. Oh, she laughed lightly. James said I could hold on to it for now. James, my son, he gave away his father's watch. Without asking me. I didn't raise him like this. That night I couldn't sleep. I replayed everything. The missing documents, the early account changes, the shared transfer, the rehearsed voices, and one thought kept rising. What if Harold didn't choose this? What if he was pressured? Or worse, what if he chose them over me? 2 days later, a courier delivered an envelope. No return address. Inside was a printed email chain. Between Harold, Thomas, and my son. Subject line, transition plan. The emails were dated 6 weeks ago. Harold wrote, "We need to move quickly before she starts asking questions." That was me. My heart dropped, so hard I had to sit down. Move quickly, before she starts asking questions. What questions? What were they planning? I called Thomas immediately. "You sent this, didn't you?" A pause. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I don't think your husband expected to die so soon." The words felt calculated. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he lowered his voice, "there are things you don't know about your family." My family. That evening, my son came over unannounced. He looked nervous. "Mom, we need to talk." I folded the printed emails neatly on the table between us. "Then talk." He swallowed. "There were debts." "Debts?" "Dad made some risky investments." "No," I said immediately. Harold was conservative. "Not recently." The room felt smaller. "What kind of investments?" He hesitated. "Elise's brother had a startup. Dad backed it." "Elise's brother." "Not me. Not us. Her family." "How much?" I whispered. My son didn't answer. I already knew it was bad. "Dad, didn't want you stressed," he said again. That sentence, over and over, as if I were too delicate for truth. "Did you want me humiliated instead?" I asked quietly. My son looked at me like he didn't recognize the woman in front of him. "Mom, we're trying to fix it." "We." I wasn't part of we. After he left, I opened the house safe. One thing Harold never moved. Our original property deed. It was still there, untouched, which meant the house was still fully in my name. Not transferred, not shared, mine, for now. The next morning, I received a legal notice. Meeting requested. Estate clarification. Requested by Elise. Not my son. Elise. My daughter-in-law was initiating estate review proceedings. Without telling me. Why? Unless there was something they thought they were entitled to. Or something they thought I didn't know. I looked at Harold's photograph on the mantel. "You were going to tell me," I whispered. "Weren't you?" Or had I already become an inconvenience? That evening, Thomas sent one final message. "One more thing you should know. The company wasn't the only thing transferred. Attached was a scanned draft of an updated will. Drafted, but not finalized. In it, the house. Left jointly to my son and Elise. Conditional upon my voluntary relocation." Voluntary relocation. They were planning my exit. From my own home. Before Harold died. I sat very still. Very calm. For the first time since the funeral. I wasn't grieving. I was thinking. If the will wasn't finalized. If the house was still legally mine. If the investments were failing. Then they needed something. From me. And that meant, for the first time, I had leverage. But I didn't know yet how far they were willing to go. Or what Harold had really signed before his heart stopped beating. Because just as I turned off the lights, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A single message. "Stop digging. It won't end the way you think." I stared at the screen. And for the first time since my husband's funeral, I felt something stronger than grief. War. And by the time I opened the second envelope, I was no longer the grieving widow. I was the obstacle. The legal notice sat on my dining table like a challenge. Estate clarification meeting. Requested by Elise Carter. Not my son. Her. That detail mattered. Because it meant this wasn't panic. It was strategy. I didn't call my son. I called a lawyer. Not the one Harold used for the company. A different one. A woman. Margaret Doyle. Calm voice. Sharp mind. I explained only part of it. My husband died unexpectedly. There's talk of restructuring. depths, and a will I've never seen. She didn't react emotionally. She asked one question. Do you feel excluded? I swallowed. Yes. Then we start there. That afternoon, I searched Harold's study again. This time slowly, carefully. Men like Harold always kept duplicates. Not in obvious places, in quiet ones, behind books, inside old binders, between tax folders no one opens. It took 2 hours. Then I found it, tucked inside an old gardening manual he never used. A sealed envelope, my name written in his handwriting. Not Nana, not Honey, my full legal name. That meant it was formal, intentional. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, a copy of his previous will, dated 2 years ago, before Elise's brother, before the transition plan, before the sudden urgency. In that version, everything came to me, the house, the shares, the savings, with one instruction. Ensure fairness when the time is right. Fairness, not control, not relocation. Fairness. I sat very still, because this meant something critical. Harold had once trusted me completely, which meant something changed. The question was, what? Or who? The estate meeting was scheduled for Friday. 3 days away. 3 days for them to prepare their narrative. 3 days for me to prepare mine. That evening, my son came over again, this time without Elise. He looked tired, guilty. Mom, I think you're misunderstanding things. I gestured for him to sit. I found an earlier will. His face changed, just slightly, but enough. That was outdated. Outdated or inconvenient. His jaw tightened. You think we're trying to take advantage of you? I held his gaze. I think decisions were made without me. He exhaled sharply. Elise's brother's company collapsed. Dad panicked. He tried to recover the losses by shifting shares temporarily. Temporarily to you? Yes. And the house? Silence. There it was again. Silence always told the truth. Dad wanted to protect you, he said quietly. From what? From stress. I leaned forward. James, I raised you. I worked 2 jobs when your father's first business failed. I managed every bill in this house for 38 years. Don't tell me I can't handle stress. His eyes softened. For a second, I saw my little boy. Then it vanished. It's complicated. No, I said evenly. It's deliberate. After he left, I reviewed the email Thomas had sent. We need to move quickly before she starts asking questions. Move quickly. Why the urgency? Unless Harold was hesitating. Unless he wasn't fully convinced. Unless he was being pressured. The next morning, Margaret called. I pulled preliminary filings, she said. Anything unusual? Yes. My stomach tightened. Your husband scheduled an appointment to revise his will again. 2 days before his death. I stood up. What? It wasn't finalized. But he initiated the request. Revise again. Why would he revise again? Unless he regretted something. Or discovered something. Margaret, I asked carefully, if someone pressures a man to alter estate documents under financial strain, is that contestable? It depends on evidence, she replied. Why? Because I think someone needed his signature more than he wanted to give it. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I checked Harold's old tablet, the one he used at home. It had been sitting in a drawer untouched. No password. He trusted this house. I opened his notes app. There were dozens of grocery lists, random reminders, then one titled, Meeting with T. T. Thomas? I opened it. It wasn't long. Just 3 lines. They're pushing too hard. I need more time. Nana must not find out yet. My chest tightened. Must not find out. Not because I couldn't handle it, but because something wasn't finished. Something wasn't settled. The estate meeting arrived faster than I expected. Elise was already seated when I walked in. Professional. Composed. My son beside her. Thomas across the table. And a young attorney representing the company. They were prepared. But so was I. Margaret sat beside me. Quiet. Observing. The attorney began smoothly. We're here to clarify distribution intentions and avoid future misunderstandings. Misunderstandings? I almost smiled. Elise spoke next. We just want transparency. For everyone. Everyone. There was again. That word that never included me. The updated draft will was presented. The one transferring joint ownership of the house. Conditional upon my relocation to a smaller property to reduce burden. Reduce burden. I looked directly at Elise. Was I consulted about my burden? Her smile faltered. It wasn't meant like that. Then how was it meant? Silence again. Margaret leaned forward. Before proceeding, we would like acknowledgement of an earlier will dated 2 years ago. The room shifted. My son blinked. Thomas's jaw tightened slightly. I wasn't aware Mrs. May had that copy, he said carefully. Neither were we, Elise whispered. Exactly. Margaret continued calmly. There is also record of a scheduled revision 2 days prior to Mr. May's passing. That suggests potential reconsideration. The company attorney stiffened. That revision was never completed. Intent matters, Margaret replied. Yes, it does. I watched Thomas carefully. His expression remained controlled, but his fingers tapped once on the table. Impatience. Or calculation. You're suggesting Harold was unsure, he asked. I'm suggesting, I said clearly, that my husband was under pressure. The room went cold. That's a serious accusation, the attorney said. Then disprove it. For the first time since the funeral, they were reacting to me, not managing me, not guiding me, reacting. Power had shifted, just slightly, but enough. The meeting ended without resolution. They needed time. So did I. As we walked out, Elise grabbed my arm gently. You're making this harder than it has to be. I removed her hand calmly. It was already hard. That night, I received another message from the unknown number. You're destabilizing things. Destabilizing. That word told me everything. They weren't confident. They were afraid. Then the final blow came. Margaret called late. I found something else. I closed my eyes. What? Your husband increased his life insurance policy 4 weeks ago. For weeks. Before the restructuring. Before the transfer. Before the panic. To whom? I whispered. There was a pause. You. Just me. No shared beneficiaries. No son. No daughter-in-law. Just me. Which meant, if the investments failed, if the shares were unstable, if the company was restructuring, and Harold suddenly died, the only person financially secure was me. I sat in the dark for a long time. They thought I was the weak link, the emotional widow, the woman too fragile for paperwork. But they hadn't expected me to read everything, to question everything, to remember everything, because one truth was becoming clear. Harold had been caught between pressure and protection, and someone needed him to sign quickly, before he changed his mind. Before I started asking questions, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. One sentence. You're not the only one who knows about the insurance. I stared at the screen. Insurance. Pressure. Urgency. Revisions. And a heart attack in his office. Instant. For the first time, a thought crossed my mind that I had been too afraid to form. What if my husband's death wasn't as simple as they said? And if that were true, then this wasn't about inheritance. It was about something much darker. And the first time I questioned my husband's death out loud, the room went completely silent. Not shocked, not offended, afraid. And that was when I knew I wasn't imagining it. Harold had always been careful with his health. Low salt, daily walks, quarterly checkups. He complained about stress sometimes, yes, but he was not careless, not reckless, not the kind of man who collapsed without warning. Yet that was the official explanation. Massive cardiac event. Instant. Close file. Move on. But there was one detail that wouldn't leave me alone. There had been no autopsy. Because it was natural causes. Because he was over 60. Because it was obvious. Obvious to who? I called the hospital 2 days after that last message about the insurance. I kept my voice steady. I'd like to request a copy of my husband's full medical report. There was a pause. You were already given the summary. I'd like the full report. Another pause. I'll need to check authorization. Authorization? I was his wife. 38 years. But somehow I needed authorization. An hour later, I received a call. Not from the hospital. From Thomas Green. You're requesting medical files now, he asked calmly. I didn't answer his question. How did you know? Silence. Then a soft exhale. Nana. I understand grief makes people look for patterns that aren't there. Grief. They loved that word. It explained away everything. Did you know there was no autopsy? I asked. It wasn't necessary. According to who? The attending physician. And you were there. A beat too long before he answered. Yes. He hadn't told me that. He hadn't mentioned being present. Why? Why leave that out? That night, I called Margaret again. Can a spouse request an independent autopsy after burial? I asked. It's rare, she said carefully, but possible with court approval. Court. Legal escalation. Public record. Noise. Was I ready for that? I didn't know, but I knew something else. If they were nervous about paperwork, they would panic about exhumation. The next morning, I did something I should have done earlier. I went to Harold's office, unannounced. The receptionist looked surprised. Oh, Mrs. May, we thought you'd need more time. Time? I smiled politely. I've had enough time. Thomas wasn't there, but his assistant was. Young. Nervous. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I'd like to see my husband's office, I said. That might not be appropriate right now. I'm his wife. She swallowed. Mr. Green instructed us to begin restructuring immediately. Of course he did. Restructuring what? Operational access, file transfers, digital assets, meaning devices, emails, records. When I stepped into Harold's office, it no longer looked like his. His framed photos were gone. His desk was cleared. Even the small scratch on the wooden drawer had been polished over. Erased. They were erasing him. Quickly, I walked to the cabinet where he kept personal items. Locked. It had never been locked before. Who changed this? I asked. The assistant shifted uncomfortably. I don't know, but she did. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I took a photo of the lock, then another of the empty desk. Then I left. By evening, my son called. You went to Dad's office? Yes. You're making this look suspicious. I closed my eyes. It already is. You're talking about autopsies now, Mom. Yes. He went very quiet. You can't seriously think. I don't think anything, I said evenly. I'm verifying. There's a difference. That night, I couldn't sleep. So I replayed the last week before Harold died. Every detail, every shift, every strange sentence. Then I remembered something small. The night before his death, he came home later than usual. He didn't eat dinner. He didn't kiss me goodnight. He sat at the edge of the bed and said, if anything happens, trust your instincts. At the time, I thought he meant business stress. Now, I wasn't so sure. The next morning, Margaret called. I reviewed the hospital intake logs, she said. And your husband wasn't brought in by ambulance. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? He was transported privately. By who? A pause. Thomas Green. The room spun. Why would his boss personally transport him? Why not call emergency services? Why no ambulance record? Was time lost? I whispered. We can't know without a deeper review. Deeper review. Meaning, autopsy, investigation, exposure. That afternoon, Elise came over. Alone. She looked pale. You need to stop this, she said quietly. Stop what? Asking questions. I studied her carefully. Why does that scare you? It doesn't. Then why are you here? Her composure cracked just slightly. Because if this turns into something public, the company collapses. The company, not the family, not grief. The company. Did Harold argue with Thomas before he died? I asked. She hesitated. I don't know. Did he argue with you? No. Too fast. You're protecting someone, I said softly. I'm protecting my husband. From what? Her eyes flickered. Then she whispered something that changed everything. There were investors involved. Investors, not just family money, outside money, high risk. I asked. She nodded once. And if Harold backed out? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. That night, I officially filed a request for independent medical review. Not full exhumation yet. Just review. Paper trail. enough to shake foundations. 2 hours later, Thomas called. For the first time, he didn't sound calm. This is unnecessary. Is it? You're destabilizing financial agreements. Agreements that depended on my husband's signature? Yes. And if he was reconsidering? Silence. Then, you don't understand the scale of this. You're right, I said quietly. I don't, but I will. The next morning, something unexpected happened. The attending physician called me directly. I've been informed you're requesting further review, he said carefully. Yes. A long pause. There were irregularities. My heart slammed. What kind? I advised extended observation. And Mr. Green insisted time was critical. Critical for what? He wouldn't answer. But his silence was loud enough. When I hung up, I realized something chilling. If Harold had survived longer, if he had regained consciousness, if he had spoken, what might he have said? What might he have reversed? That evening, I stood in my living room, staring at Harold's photo again. You were trying to fix something, I whispered. And someone needed you quiet. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. This time, a photo, taken from across the street, of me, standing at my window, watching. The message underneath read, "You're digging in the wrong direction." No, I wasn't. And that terrified them. Because if this wasn't just about inheritance, if this wasn't just about restructuring, if investors were involved, if time was critical, if he was transported privately, if observation was cut short, then this wasn't a family dispute. It was damage control. And someone was very afraid of what an autopsy might reveal. And by the time I learned about the investor, I stopped thinking like a widow. I started thinking like a witness. Because investors don't panic over natural deaths. They panic over exposure. Elise had said it quietly. There were investors involved. Plural. But when Margaret pulled corporate filings, there was only one new name added in the past 6 months. One. A silent partner. No public profile. No company history. No digital footprint beyond a single LLC registered 3 states away. The name listed, Arden Holdings Group. It sounded powerful, established, untouchable. It wasn't. It was 3 months old. 3 months. The same timeline as Harold's sudden urgency. The same timeline as the share transfer. The same timeline as the will draft revision. Not coincidence. Sequence. Who owns Arden? I asked Margaret. That's the strange part, she said. It's layered. Layered companies. Shell over shell. But every shell leaves fingerprints. You just have to look long enough. That night, I confronted my son again. I was done waiting for gentle conversations. Who introduced Dad to Arden Holdings? He looked confused. What? The investor? He blinked. That was Thomas's contact. Of course it was. And you met them? Briefly. Where? At the office. Name? He hesitated. They never used one. Never used one. That wasn't business. That was shielding. Did Dad seem comfortable? I asked. My son's face tightened. He was stressed. About the money? No. Then what? Silence. Then, he said he didn't like how fast they wanted decisions. There it was again. Move quickly. Time is critical. Pressure. That evening, Margaret called with something new. You need to sit down, she said. I already was. The registered mailing address for Arden Holdings. Yes. It routes through a private legal proxy firm. That's normal for large investors. Yes. But this firm has only one major client. My pulse slowed. Who? She hesitated. Thomas Green. I didn't feel shock. I felt confirmation. Arden Holdings wasn't external pressure. It was internal leverage. Manufactured urgency. Manufactured risk. Manufactured crisis. Which meant the investor who shouldn't exist existed exactly where I suspected. Inside the company. Inside the plan. Inside the transition. But why? Why create fake pressure? Why push Harold into fast restructuring? Why transfer shares to my son? Why alter the will? Unless someone needed control of assets quickly before something collapsed. 2 days later, something unexpected happened. The independent medical review request was approved for preliminary examination, not full exhumation, but enough to review treatment decisions, enough to ask questions, enough to create paperwork. Paperwork scares guilty people. That afternoon, Thomas arrived at my house without warning. He didn't knock gently this time. He knocked like he owned the door. "I think we need to speak honestly," he said. "We should have done that weeks ago." He didn't sit. He paced. "I built that company with Harold." "No," I corrected calmly. "You built it beside him." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand corporate realities." "Then explain them." He stopped pacing. "There were liquidity issues. So you created an investor. It was strategic. It was you." He didn't deny it. "You leveraged artificial risk to force asset movement," I said evenly. His eyes narrowed. "You're smarter than Harold gave you credit for." The insult slid off me. "That's not what this is about." "No," he said quietly. "It's about survival." "For who?" "For all of us." "No, not all. Just him." "Did Harold know Arden was yours?" I asked. A pause. He knew I control negotiations. "That's not what I asked." His silence answered. "You pressured him," I said. "I protected him." "From what?" "From collapse." "What collapse?" He didn't respond. Because he couldn't. Because the collapse wasn't financial. It was legal. Or reputational. Or criminal. Before leaving, he said something that chilled me. "If this autopsy review escalates, investors will pull out." "You are the investor," I replied. His expression shifted. Just slightly. Too slightly for anyone else to notice. But I did. And that was enough. That night, my son called in a panic. "Mom, the board is questioning everything." "Good. They are reviewing Thomas's authority." "Good. You've destabilized the company." "No. I destabilized the lie." Then Margaret delivered the next blow. I traced Arden's funding source, and it originated from an emergency corporate loan. "When?" She exhaled slowly. "The morning your husband died." I felt the world tilt. The morning, not before, not weeks prior. That morning. Why take a loan if the investor already existed? I whispered. "Because the investor was never real liquidity," she said. "It was leverage, not funding, a threat, not capital," which meant the pressure was fake. The urgency was staged. The restructuring was forced, and Harold was resisting. Then I remembered something small. 2 days before he died, Harold received a call at dinner. He stepped outside. When he came back in, his hands were shaking. I asked him what was wrong. He said, "Just business." "No, not just business. Threat." The preliminary medical review results arrived 3 days later. Not conclusive, but disturbing. There was a notation in his intake chart. "Patient alert upon arrival. Requested to speak privately." Requested to speak privately. With who? The report didn't specify, but it listed the person who denied the request. Thomas Green. My heart pounded. So hard I had to grip the table. Harold was conscious, alert, trying to speak. And Thomas refused private access. Why? What was he afraid Harold would say? That night I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I wrote everything down. Timeline. Pressure. Fake investor. Share transfer. Will draft. Insurance increase. Private transport. Denied privacy. Emergency loan. It wasn't random. It was coordinated. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. But this time, no threat. Just one sentence. "You're finally looking in the right place." Whoever was texting me wasn't protecting Thomas. They were guiding me. Why? What did they want? I stared at Harold's photograph again. "You were fighting something," I whispered. "And they needed you compliant. Or silent." Then Margaret called one last time that evening. "There's one more detail." I closed my eyes. "What now?" "The life insurance policy increase." "Yes." "It required secondary witness approval." My blood ran cold. "Who signed as witness?" She didn't hesitate. "Thomas Green." Insurance increase. Asset transfers. Fake investor. Emergency loan. Denied private statement. All witnessed. All controlled. By the same man. This wasn't coincidence. It was consolidation. Control. positioning, and if Harold had survived. If he had spoken, if he had reversed, everything would have collapsed, which meant the question was no longer, was there pressure? The question was his death convenient? And if it was, then I wasn't fighting for inheritance. I was standing in the middle of something much larger, much darker. My phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. This time, a location pin, followed by 3 words. You need proof. Proof. Not suspicion. Not intuition. Proof. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what I might find. I was afraid of how far this already went. And the night I followed the location pin, I understood something clearly. Whoever was guiding me wasn't doing it out of kindness. They were doing it because the truth was dangerous. And dangerous truths create leverage. The location led to a small storage facility on the edge of town. Not dramatic. Not abandoned. Just quiet. Ordinary. That made it worse. Because ordinary places hide extraordinary secrets. I didn't go alone. Not this time. Margaret insisted. If someone wants you to find something, she said calmly, they also want control of when you find it. She was right. Control had been the theme from the beginning. The unit number was included in the message. C-17. When we arrived, the lock was already cut. Not broken violently. Removed cleanly. As if someone wanted access easy. As if someone expected me. Inside, boxes, filing cartons, one old leather briefcase I recognized immediately. Harold's, the one he stopped bringing home 2 months before he died. My hands felt numb as I opened it. Inside, a digital recorder, old-fashioned, not his phone, not cloud-backed, manual, private, hidden. There was a single audio file saved, dated 3 days before his death. I stared at the device for a long time before pressing play. His voice filled the small storage unit. Tired, strained, but clear. If this recording is ever found, it means I ran out of time. My breath stopped. I trusted the wrong person. I let urgency cloud judgment. Paper shuffling. Then, Thomas is not the investor. He is the risk. Margaret inhaled sharply beside me. Harold continued. He created Arden to scare the board. To scare me. To push transfers. I thought I could outmaneuver him quietly. Outmaneuver. So I began reversing things. My knees almost gave out. Reversing. That's why he scheduled the will revision. That's why he requested more time. That's why he tried to speak privately at the hospital. He wasn't collapsing under pressure. He was correcting it. Then his voice changed. Lower. More urgent. He doesn't know I moved the contingency. Contingency. What contingency? I whispered at the silent device. The recording continued. If anything happens to me, the real documentation isn't in the office. Margaret and I locked eyes. It's secured with someone he doesn't suspect. Someone he doesn't suspect. Who? The audio crackled slightly. I didn't tell Nana because I wanted her safe from it. That sentence hurt. But now I understood. Not exclusion. Protection. There's one file he must never access. The recording paused, as if Harold hesitated. If he realizes I blocked the final transfer, he'll panic. Blocked. Final transfer. What final transfer? Then, footsteps. Muffled voices. Harold whispering urgently. They're earlier than expected. The recording cut off abruptly. No ending. No explanation. Just silence. Margaret exhaled slowly. This changes everything. Yes, it did. Because now, it wasn't suspicion. It was evidence. Harold knew. Harold resisted. Harold documented. And Harold ran out of time. On the drive home, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Now you see. 3 words. No threats this time. Just confirmation. Whoever this person was, they had access to the storage unit. They knew about the recording. They wanted me to have it. But why not go to police? Why guide me instead? Unless they were inside the system too. Watching. Waiting. When I got home, my son was sitting in my living room. Alone. He stood quickly. Mom, what are you doing? Listening. To what? To Dad. His face drained of color. What do you mean? I didn't answer directly. Did Dad ever mention a contingency plan? His breathing changed. Not to me, but he was reversing something. How do you know that? Because he told me. Because he trusted the truth more than fear at the end. Elise is scared, my son said quietly. Of what? Exposure. Good. She said Thomas has emails that could implicate Dad in financial manipulation. There it was. The threat. If you speak, we drag him down with us. Classic. James, I said carefully. If your father was correcting something illegal, not causing it, would you want the truth buried? He didn't answer immediately. Then softly, no. I showed him part of the recording. Not all. Just enough. When Harold said, Thomas is not the investor. He is the risk. My son sat down hard. That's impossible. No, I said calmly. It's documented. Then came the second revelation. Margaret had analyzed timestamps embedded in the audio file. It wasn't recorded 3 days before his death. It was modified 2 days before. Modified, meaning someone accessed it after he recorded it. But before it reached me, someone inside the storage facility had opened that device recently, which meant whoever sent me the location pin was protecting the recording, not hiding it, protecting it. That night, I received the most chilling message yet. Not from the unknown number. From Thomas. We need to talk immediately. Not calm. Not composed. Urgent. He knew something shifted. I agreed to meet him. Public place. Bright lights. Witnesses. When he arrived, he didn't sit. He leaned forward across the table. What did you find? I tilted my head slightly. Why do you assume I found anything? His mask slipped. For just a second, because only a guilty man fears discovery before accusation. You're destabilizing financial timelines, he said. Or exposing them? His jaw tightened. You don't know what you're interfering with. I know my husband recorded you. Silence. Real silence. You're bluffing, he said finally. No. I pressed play. Just one sentence. Thomas is not the investor. He is the risk. The color drained from his face. For the first time, he looked afraid. That recording is incomplete, he said quickly. So is your version of events. He stood abruptly. You release that, and you destroy everything Harold built. No, I replied quietly. You already tried. He leaned down close enough for only me to hear. You think this ends with paperwork. The threat wasn't subtle anymore. But neither was I. I think it ends with truth. When he left, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Be careful. He's cornered now. Cornered. Cornered men don't negotiate. They react. Back home, I replayed the recording alone. Over and over. There's one file he must never access. One file. One contingency. One safeguard. Secured with someone he doesn't suspect. And then, it hit me. There was one person Thomas would never suspect. One person he underestimated completely. One person he thought was too fragile for business, too emotional for strategy, too soft for secrets. Me. But if that were true, if Harold hid the final contingency with me, then it wasn't in a storage unit. It wasn't in his office. It wasn't in the company. It was somewhere Thomas had already dismissed. Somewhere personal. Somewhere domestic. Somewhere. Inside this house. I looked around slowly. Kitchen. Study. Bedroom. Attic. Basement. 38 years of shared life. 38 years of hiding places. And suddenly, the house didn't feel invaded. It felt armed, because if Harold had planned one final move, he would have placed it somewhere only I would understand. Not as a widow, not as a bystander, but as his partner. And if I found it, Thomas Green wouldn't just lose control. He would lose everything. My phone buzzed one last time before midnight. Unknown number. Just 2 words. Check the garden. The garden. Harold's least favorite hobby. The gardening manual where he hid the earlier will. The place no one thought mattered. The place Thomas would never search. I stood up slowly. Heart steady. Mind clear. If the final contingency was there, then this was never about inheritance. It was about exposure. And I was one step away from it. And at 11:47 p.m., I walked into my own garden like it was a crime scene. The night air was cold, but not enough to explain the chill moving through my bones. Check the garden. 2 words. No explanation. No signature. Just direction. And somehow I knew. This was the turning point. Harold hated gardening. 38 years of marriage, and he never once voluntarily planted anything. Yet 3 months before his death, he insisted on redoing the rose bed. Red roses, deep crimson, the dramatic kind. At the time, I thought it was guilt, a late-life attempt at romance. Now, I wasn't so sure. The soil near the roses looked slightly uneven. Not obvious, but not natural either. Someone had disturbed it recently. Or perhaps, 3 months ago. I went inside and grabbed a small hand shovel. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just quiet, intentional. The first few inches were loose, recently turned. My pulse quickened. Margaret's words echoed in my mind. If he created a contingency, he would make sure only you could find it. Why? Because Harold knew something about me that Thomas never did. I noticed patterns, small inconsistencies, tiny shifts, and Harold trusted that. 6 inches down, metal, the faint scrape of steel against something solid. I froze, then carefully brushed the soil aside. A small waterproof container, sealed tight, breath steady, hands trembling. I lifted it from the earth like it was fragile glass, like it might disappear if I blinked. Inside, a flash drive, a folded envelope, and a ring. Not my wedding ring, not his. A simple silver band I'd never seen before. Inside the envelope, my name, in Harold's handwriting. Not rushed, not panicked, careful, intentional. I sat on the garden bench before opening it. The roses swayed gently beside me, silent witnesses. My Nana. If you are reading this, then I failed to finish what I started. My throat tightened. I underestimated how quickly Thomas would escalate. Escalate. Not negotiate. Not argue. Escalate. I moved the final transfer into a trust he cannot access. Trust. There it was. The trust is triggered by exposure, not death. Exposure. That word again. Harold wasn't protecting assets. He was building a trap. If Thomas attempts to liquidate Arden's pending acquisition without board consensus, the system flags irregular authorization. Ardent. So it wasn't just a scare tactic. It was a vehicle, a mechanism, a smokescreen. I embedded proof of unauthorized leverage inside the compliance audit. Compliance audit. The most boring document in corporate existence, which is precisely why no one would look closely. Except someone meticulous. Someone like Harold. The flash drive contains the audit trail and his personal authorization codes. Codes. That explained the ring. I turned it over in my hand. Tiny engraving on the inside. 3 numbers. 2 letters. 3 numbers. Not decorative. Functional. He will not suspect you, the letter continued. He believes you are sentimental, not strategic. A small smile broke through my tears. Thomas always spoke over me at board dinners. Explained simple financial terms slowly, as if I were a polite guest in my own life. Let him underestimate me. Harold had. Strategically, if you choose to expose this, it will not only protect you, it will transfer majority control of Arden's holdings into the protected trust. Majority control. That wasn't small. That wasn't symbolic. That was decisive. But understand, Harold wrote, he will not surrender quietly. I didn't expect him to. The final line stopped my breathing. I am not afraid for myself. I am afraid of what cornered men will do. The garden felt different now. Not peaceful. Guarded. As if Harold had built a final chess move beneath the soil, and left me the board. Inside, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. Folders opened. Audit revisions. Timestamp logs. Internal memos. But one file stood out. Authorization _override_TG. Thomas Green. Initials undeniable. The file showed something simple but devastating. Thomas had initiated a forced transfer of acquisition funds into an external holding company, one that looped back to a shell entity tied to Arden. A circular extraction, legal looking, technically catastrophic, if completed, but the final approval was missing, blocked. Harold's signature field marked, pending review. He stopped it. At the last second, if Thomas pushed forward now, the override would trigger, and the system would log unauthorized execution, publicly, irrefutably, which meant Thomas wasn't just protecting his reputation, he was protecting his freedom. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Did you find it? I typed back one word. Yes. A pause. Then, good. He's accelerating. Accelerating. He knew something. What? Moments later, Margaret called. They called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. Of course they did. Thomas wouldn't wait. He tried to complete the transfer before I could react, before I understood, before I acted. But Harold didn't design this for hesitation. He designed it for timing. If Thomas attempted the override, the trust would activate, and control would shift, not to me directly, but to the protected structure Harold created. Safe, locked, untouchable. There was one catch. The override required his authorization codes, which were engraved inside the ring, and without them, the transfer would stall. But if he attempted to bypass them, the system would record forced entry. Either way, he was exposed, unless he suspected I had the codes, unless he suspected the contingency was real, unless the unknown number wasn't protecting me, but ensuring I triggered the trap at the right time. I thought back to the storage unit, the modified timestamp. Someone accessed the recorder before I did. Someone preserved it. Someone ensured it reached me. Why not go public? Why not deliver everything to authorities? Because maybe the system only worked if Thomas made the move himself, if he believed he still had control, which meant I couldn't confront him now. I had to let him think he could still win. The next morning, I dressed carefully, not dramatically, not defiantly, calm, neutral, measured. At the boardroom entrance, Thomas was already there, composed, but tense. "You're here?" he asked coolly. "I am a shareholder," I replied. "Yes," he said slowly. For now. The meeting began. Financial updates, acquisition timelines, projected returns. Then, Thomas cleared his throat. "We are initiating the final authorization of Arden's acquisition today." He glanced at me, testing, waiting, hoping for reaction. I gave him none. "Authorization requires executive override," the CFO said. Thomas nodded. "I'll input it directly." He stood, walked to the central console, entered the first sequence, the second. Then, he paused. The ring. He looked down at his hand. No ring. Of course not. The ring wasn't jewelry. It was security, and it was in my purse. He entered the codes manually, guessing, estimating, sweat forming at his temple. The system hesitated, processing. Then, red notification. Override attempt logged. Silence in the room. Another message appeared. Authorization mismatch recorded. The CFO frowned. "That's unusual." Thomas tried again. Harder this time. Frustration visible. The screen flashed. Unauthorized escalation detected. And then, the final line. Protected trust activation initiated. Gasps. Confusion. Board members whispering. What trust? What activation? The CFO turned pale. Majority holding has shifted. Thomas stepped back slowly. "No," he whispered. I stood. Calm. Steady. "Harold built a safeguard," I said evenly, "in case someone attempted to move funds without full consent." Eyes turned to Thomas. Not mine. His. "You knew," he said quietly. "Yes." And for the first time, he looked small, not powerful, not strategic. Cornered. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Checkmate. But something about that word unsettled me, because chess only ends when one king falls, and Thomas hadn't fallen yet. He had only been exposed. As the meeting dissolved into chaos, legal calls, compliance alerts, security inquiries, I realized something else. The unknown number knew the timing, knew the trust would activate, knew the board meeting, knew everything, which meant they weren't outside this. They were inside it. And if they helped me win, they weren't doing it for loyalty. They were doing it for positioning. That night, after Thomas was escorted out by internal compliance officers, I received one final message. No number this time. Blocked. Now we talk. Talk. Not guide. Not warn. Not advise. Talk. Harold protected me from Thomas. But who was protecting me from the person who orchestrated the exposure? Who ensured the trap sprung perfectly? Who knew every internal timeline? The garden gave me answers. The boardroom gave me leverage. But the unknown still held the final card. And I had the unsettling feeling. This wasn't the end. This was the invitation.